Hey folks, Mr. Hayhurst here, back with another English language arts information bomb, bringing you weapons of mass comprehension. And in today's video we're taking a look at the second reading behavior called notice when you lose your way. So please make note that the video code down here in the lower right hand portion of the screen is RB002. So this is our second video in the series. So let's go ahead and get started. I want you to think about real life for a moment and how real life always changes the way we view things in our heads. So let's take a look at this. So, how would the story change if Snow White had 4 kids and a dog and a lazy husband? How would her life have changed? And more importantly, would she still be considered the sweet girl that she once was? And this is how real life is, guys. We have an idealized view, a pie in the sky view at times of the way life is supposed to go, and then when real life hits us, sometimes we don't know what to do with it. So the entire theme of today's video is dealing with this problem as it relates to reading. I'm sure all of you guys have had this feeling before, right? When you're just not feeling it. And this funny picture here says, "I can't brain today, I has the dumb." And I know I've felt like this at times, and you just feel like you can't really concentrate on anything because for whatever reason your brain just doesn't seem to be working that day. So I think this is all a feeling that we can relate to, and I think it's important to recognize it when it happens. So to help illustrate this further, I want to use one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's from a guy you might know. His name's Mike Tyson, and he had a very funny quote that he used one time that reads, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." And I like this particular quote because it gets to this idea of, yeah, we have a plan, we have an idea of the way things are supposed to be, but what happens when we get punched in the face? Or using this as a metaphor to understanding, what do we do when real life comes a knocking, and what happens when things aren't necessarily going our way, right? So what do we do when real life comes into the mix? What do we do when we're not feeling it? There's another quote that I like to use a bit, and it's a Japanese proverb that says, "Fall down 7 times, stand up 8." It's a very, very old proverb, and it's basically saying no matter how many times you get knocked down, get up. Don't give up. Here's another way of looking at it. It's a pretty cool image here. It says, "Never give up. Go over, go under, go around, or go through, but never give up." So for me personally, I'm always trying to empower you through developing an attribute that we call tenacity. It's an inborn stubbornness, a willpower trait where you don't want to give up. And a lot of times in class, you'll hear me use this phrase, active persistence. First off, you have to understand that if you're sitting in the class or if you're at home working on homework, whatever, if you're just passively there, you're not actively engaged in what you're doing, there's not much learning that's going to go on. You have to be active. You have to be present and in the moment, trying to figure out what it is that you're having problems with, or tapping into those periods of creative flow where everything just seems to be working for you and you just really understand everything. But when stuff starts breaking down, you need to develop this attribute of active persistence. And it's just like a muscle. You have to work it out. It's not something that you're going to have overnight, and it takes time to develop it. So the big question is how does this relate to reading? And the way it relates to reading is like this. I'm sure you guys have all been here before, right? You're in class, you're at home, You're trying to concentrate on something and you're either too tired, or maybe you're bored, or stressed out, or even confused. And what ends up happening is whenever you're experiencing one of these things, or maybe all four things at the same time, you're going to lose your way. And remember, our first reading behavior was following our inner conversation. So when any of these four things happen to you, whether you're tired or you're bored or you're stressed out or confused, it makes it difficult for you to follow your inner conversation. And that's really, really important. And like I keep saying, following your inner conversation is the foundation for all of the other reading behaviors that we're going to teach you. So if you lose this one, then all the other ones fall apart. So it's really important to understand this. So, with continuing on with our first cluster of monitoring our comprehension, the second reading behavior is notice when you lose your way. And we have a few goals that we want to achieve with this particular reading behavior. The first one is we want to notice when we stray from our inner conversation with the text, and then use strategies to refocus and get back on track. It's perfectly okay to lose our way, and in fact, it's going to happen a lot. And we just have to make peace with that, and more importantly, we just have to understand the tools that we can use to get our focus back and keep on with our work. The second goal is noticing when meaning breaks down due to lack of understanding, and then stopping and repairing it before reading on. We just don't want to keep on reading when we don't understand something, because all we're doing is adding layers to the things that we don't understand. And then eventually we could add so many layers and get too far ahead that we really have no idea what we just read. So it's easier just to monitor everything in bite-sized chunks, notice when meaning breaks down because we don't understand something, we stop, take a breath, go back over it again, and repair it before we continue on. Okay, so these two goals will be the primary goals that we'll try to achieve with this particular lesson. And let's go ahead and move on to the next segment. So continuing on, let's take a look at some basic distractions. Now I'm just going to use myself as an example here, but I'm pretty sure a majority of you all have these similar problems with distractions. So some of my basic distractions are things like times when I find myself reading something but I just really don't get it. For whatever reason, I'm just reading it and I'm just not getting it. And I might either space out in the middle of reading part of it, or I can completely read it all attentively and I'm just not understanding it for whatever reason. Uh, Happens to the best of us, and it's just something that we have to learn to notice and, more importantly, figure out how to fix it. Another one is maybe I can read the words, but I don't understand the concept or idea that that particular word or group of words is getting at. It could be some very high level vocabulary, or it could be vocabulary that's specific to a particular like job or area of study. A lot of times you'll hear me use the word jargon, and that is usually words or phrases that are specific to a particular discipline. And so sometimes when you're reading and you're coming across jargon, you can read the words, you might be able to pronounce them and everything, but you really just don't understand what the word is getting at or the idea behind it. Another distraction that I have is sometimes I come across words I don't know, but I can figure out the overall meaning using context clues. So I just kind of read on for a little bit, and I still get the gist of what the author is trying to say. Also, I'll be reading along, and I don't notice my inner conversation at all. And I don't concentrate on the words and the ideas, and I'm just completely distracted with something else. I'm preoccupied with something that might be happening later on that day, or maybe if it's at night, I might be worrying about something that I need to do in the morning and things of that nature. So it's really, really easy to be affected by these basic distractions. And a common one that happens to me quite frequently is I read in bed before I go to sleep, and usually, I'll be reading, and I'll read for however long, and then put my bookmark in the book, and then the next day I look where I left off, and I completely don't remember reading most of what led up to that point to where I left my bookmark, and I'll usually have to go back several pages in order to figure out what it was that I read. So it happens to me quite often, and it's usually just because I'm reading for enjoyment, and so I'm not really taking notice of my inner conversation. I'm still imagining the characters and things of that nature, but when you're tired, you're going to start losing your connection to the text, and that's the point. So the idea with this whole entire lesson is seeing how these distractions affect you, but more importantly, noticing when they start affecting you. So if we go back to those four scenarios that I presented earlier of being tired, bored, stressed out, or confused, there's variations on all of these. You might not be bored, but it could be a matter of you just not being interested in the topic that's being discussed. Um, Instead of being stressed out, you could be going through other emotions. Like you could be extremely sad, or you could be extremely angry, or just in a very just depressed kind of state. Um, Instead of being tired, it could be the opposite. You could be extremely excited and you can't focus. And then instead of being confused, it might be that the work is not just confusing you, it's that it's just so high level and overwhelming that you just don't even know how to connect to it. And so you just completely feel like it's above your level or completely over your head. So, what I want you guys to do for a moment here is I want you to create a two-column chart or a T chart, and I want you to follow along with me, and I want you to title it Monitoring Comprehension, and then label the left side column Why Meaning Breaks Down, and then on the right side I want you to label it as Fix-Up Strategies. Now, fix-up strategies are quick fixes that we use when things start going wrong. So if we take a look at the left side, we had being tired, being bored, stressed out, confused. But now let's add some more stuff, like not having enough connection with the text. You're not making enough connections. It's quite common for somebody to read something and just for whatever reason they're just not really connecting to the text. And so it's really, really important to understand that if you're not making connections to the text, you're probably not going to understand it. And so it's crucial that in the very beginning you try to find something, anything that you can connect to. Now, the opposite of that is when you're making distracting connections. You're connecting to the text in such a way that you're now creating this own story in your head, taking place completely far away from what it is that you're reading at that moment. So, just like it's very important to make connections, we have to make sure that we make the right connections and we don't get distracted by them and then go off into a daydream and then realize 30 minutes later you have no idea what you've been doing. And then the last one here for today is you can't pronounce a word. You come across a word and you just totally can't pronounce it and it distracts you. And so therefore meaning breaks down. Depending on the difficulty of the text, there could be several words that you can't pronounce, and you're just really not understanding what's going on because the words are just so strange to you. So with these different items on the left, we have some fix-up strategies on the right that can help out with them. Now, some of these will match up to the items on the left, but generally speaking, you can use any of these fix-up strategies to help with several of the distractions. So one fix-up strategy is just rereading. Whether you're tired or you're bored or you're stressed out, whatever's distracting you, these are all the items on the left are reasons for why you're distracted or why meaning's breaking down for you. So you understand the why, now let's figure out what you need to do to fix it. And sometimes just rereading will do the trick. And as long as you reread it and you read it with uh, a close eye, you'll be able to make meaning out of it. Another fix-up strategy is just reading on. Let's say you can't pronounce a word for whatever reason, or you're not making enough connections, or you're a little bit confused about something. Sometimes you could just read on for a little bit, and it'll clarify what your problem is or whatever questions that you may have. So you don't want to always read on too far, because depending on the difficulty that you're having with the particular distraction, if you read on too far, you might just be adding layers to your lack of understanding. So it's like I mentioned earlier in the video, you got to be careful with that. But definitely reading on is a good thing to do. The next thing is asking questions. If you're reading a story and you're wondering why a character did something and it's kind of confusing you, well, jot down a question real quick. The brain's an interesting thing, because when we ask ourselves questions, answers pop up. And it doesn't always mean it's going to be the correct answer, but what can happen is that just by consciously asking a question about the text, and as you keep on reading, that question might be answered later, or in the background, your brain just kind of puts everything together, and then you have an idea pop in your head that might answer the question that you thought about. The next thing, and this is especially helpful when you're not able to you don't understand, it's too difficult for you, or you're confused, or you're not making connections, you can use your background knowledge. Use things that you already know to help you with your problems that you're having in that moment. So it could be experiences that you've had, or maybe other stories or articles that you've read, things that you've seen in movies or TV shows, documentaries, whatever. Use something from your past and your existing background knowledge to help you make connections, or to help you understand something that might seem confusing at first. The next is just to stop reading and refocus on the text. This is particularly useful when maybe you've kind of gotten confused, or you've made distracting connections. You might just need to realize that you're distracted, and you just stop reading, refocus, take a few moments, get your composure, and then refocus on the text, and more importantly, why you're reading the text and what you should be looking for in the text. The next thing is pretty much for when you also get distracted, or you make a distracting connection. And the idea is to mark the place with like a post-it note, or draw a little arrow, or you could just write down the page number and make note of where you got distracted for whatever reason. If you're 10 paragraphs into an article and you got distracted all of a sudden, make note of where you got distracted, and then just double check and make sure that you understand everything up to that point. If not, then of course you're probably going to have to use another fix-up strategy like rereading. And then as far as not being able to pronounce words, the general rule of thumb is to skip over the unfamiliar words and figure out how to pronounce them later. This is for more basic words that you can't pronounce, but you can pretty much figure out what's going on in the sentence. Sometimes this particular strategy is not going to work, because there's just so many words that you don't understand that you're going to have to make sense out of what those words mean. But there's a difference between not understanding what a word means and being able to pronounce it. Not being able to pronounce a word is a basic distraction. You might not be able to pronounce a certain word, but you've seen it before, and you even know what it means. So, for instance, say if you were reading some stuff on literature and you come across the word onomatopoeia. When you see onomatopoeia written out, you know what it is, but maybe for some reason you just don't know how to say it. Well, don't worry about it. You know what it means. Just skip over it, and you can worry about its pronunciation later. You don't want it to interfere with the flow of your reading, and more importantly, the monitoring of your comprehension. So, in today's example section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of really difficult text that I came across in college. I actually had to read this book in two different classes while I was in college, and it was a monster of a book to get through. No pun intended, since the title's Leviathan. But it is the book Leviathan. It was written by a gentleman named Thomas Hobbes, and it was written in 1651, if I'm not mistaken. And it is a very, very difficult book. And one of the main difficulties with this book is that it was written before spelling was invented. And what I mean by that is there weren't any established conventions on spelling rules. And so there's certain sections of the text where Hobbes would write a word three or four different ways. And it made it very, very difficult to get through the text because of the spelling issues. And so in today's example, I'm going to spare you that problem with the spelling, and I've changed the text to where the words are the regular spelling that everybody knows. Being is that this was written in the 1650s, and it was written in Europe. Basically, you're looking at some old school English, and so the way the sentence structure is not necessarily what we use today. So I'm using this to show you how I navigate through difficult text. And I found this text to be particularly difficult when I was in college, and I still find it difficult today. And it's been probably 10 years since I've looked at this. So I'm going to go through a cold reading of a particular section with you guys, and I'm going to model how I notice when I lose my way, and more importantly, when that meaning starts breaking down, what fix-up strategies do I use to help me understand what's going on. So first off, let's go ahead and take a look at the short section here that I'm going to be taking a look at. It reads, "The difference of commonwealths consisted in the difference of the sovereign, or the person representative of all and every one of the multitude." Okay, I'm already bored. Alright, let's read that again. "The difference of commonwealths consisted in the difference of the sovereign, or the person representative of all and every one of the multitude." Okay, if you notice there, what I did is I noticed that, okay, sounded like a bunch of gibberish to me. I'm already bored, so I'm already disinterested. And what did I do? I went back and I reread, but notice that I changed my reading speed. I read slower. Okay? Now, continuing on from multitude. "And because the sovereignty is either in one man or in an assembly of more than one, and into that assembly either every man hath right to enter, or not every one, but certain men distinguished from the rest, it is manifest there can be but three kinds of commonwealth." So, as you guys can see, this is not an easy bit of text, but there's a variety of things that we can do. So first off, let me go ahead and exit out of my screen here, and hopefully you guys can still see the text here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I am going to use the notes section down below to jot down my thinking about this particular piece of text. So first off, immediately I remember that this deals with politics, and specifically who should rule. So I'm looking at it, and I'm taking a look at this first sentence here. It says, "The difference of commonwealths consisted in the difference of the sovereign, or the person representative of all and every one of the multitude." Okay, so aside from feeling like I'm not really understanding what commonwealths is getting at, and the word sovereign, an even multitude, I'm getting the overall impression that this particular sentence is talking about the idea that governments have different rulers depending on who represents them. That's the overall impression that I'm getting from that particular sentence. Now, looking at it, I'm thinking that commonwealths is really a particular type of government system. But I want to double check myself to make sure, because I don't want to have an idea of what this is doing and then go down the wrong path. So since we're in a digital medium here, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go to the internet and I'm going to go to dictionary.com. Dictionary.com is an online dictionary that's really easy to use, and it actually gives you different definitions from a variety of websites, not just one. And it's pretty cool. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go to the search bar up top here, and I'm going to type the word Commonwealth and see what pops up. So it's a noun, so it's a thing. And you remember I was saying that it's like some type of form of government. And it says that it's a group of sovereign states. So there's that word sovereign again. So I better look up sovereign too. So a group of sovereign states and their dependencies associated by their own choice and linked with common objectives and interests. And then the example that it gives is the British Commonwealth. Alright, so this definition's pretty busy. So let's go down to the next one. The second one just says the Commonwealth and the Commonwealth of Nations. That's not helping me any. The third one here says a federation of states. Okay, so a federation is like a group. So a group of states, the Commonwealth of Australia. Okay. Definition 4 reads a self-governing territory associated with the U.S. And then the fifth one says the English government from the abolition of the monarchy in 1649. Okay, well, wait a minute. My reading is from 1651, so that's after this. So, hey, maybe that's why this was written in the first place. So, that's interesting. So, it's the abolishing of the monarchy. I know a monarchy is when a king or queen rules. And they established something that's called a protectorate in 1653. So that's a little bit after the writing of, or the publishing of Leviathan. And it says sometimes extended to include the restoration of Charles II in 1660. So, okay, I was pretty much on the right track with the idea of Commonwealth. It's a form of government, and we know that it's definitely something different from the monarchy, and based off of this idea of the abolition of the monarchy in 1649. So, hey, that's pretty cool. So, the difference of commonwealths consisted in the difference of the sovereign. So we got to go back and we need to figure out what sovereign is. Oh, okay. So a sovereign is a monarch, or a king, queen, or other supreme ruler, or a person who has supreme power or authority, or a group or body of persons, or a state having sovereign authority. Alright, so basically the sovereign is the ruler. Alright, so the difference in the government systems, known as commonwealths, consisted in the difference of the rulers, or the person representative of all and every one of the multitude. Okay, so for me, I'm basically thinking that the difference in governments was based on who ruled the people, or how they, let me go back here and put a comma, or how they were chosen to represent the people. That's pretty much the connections that I'm making here. Now, notice that what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to make meaning out of this, because this is a very difficult text. And it says, and because the sovereignty is either in one man or in an assembly, so basically, I guess the power to rule could be a way of looking at this idea of sovereignty. Or the powers associated with their office. So, because the sovereignty is either in one man or in an assembly, so it could be either in one person or a group of people, and into that assembly either every man hath right to enter. So to me that means into that assembly either every man hath right to enter, which basically means that anybody could become a representative in the government, or not everyone. Okay, so now we have people that are being excluded. So either all can be in part of it, or maybe some are excluded, but certain men distinguished from the rest. So for some reason they're distinguished from everybody else. It is manifest there can be but three kinds of commonwealth. So basically, it seems that Hobbes is giving three types of scenario where somebody could rule. Either everybody's allowed in, or not everyone, or only certain men distinguished from the rest. So, what I'm wondering though is, why did they have so many problems with this? So, why were there problems with kings and queens? I've seen stories and read about accounts of kings killing people and just being very, very greedy and so forth. So maybe this is one of the problems that they were having, and so they essentially abolished the monarchy. But I wonder how they abolished the monarchy. Now, since this is a digital medium, guys, what I'm basically doing is I'm completely typing this all up in the notes section. And you guys would be annotating and leaving tracks all over the page or in your notebooks or something of that nature. So the idea is, this is a pretty difficult piece of text. I read the first sentence initially and I was already bored. I was already disinterested. Just the language already turned me off. So what did I have to do? I had to reread. And then not only did I have to reread, I had to slow down. Now, I noticed that there were three words that immediately jumped out at me. And I didn't necessarily mispronounce any of them. Of course, I've come across sovereign, and you guys will have too, especially in your social studies classes. But, depending on your familiarity with it, you might not have been able to pronounce it at all. And since it pops up so many times in different ways, I felt like it was important that I needed to look it up. And in fact, when I went to go look up Commonwealth, I came across the word sovereign again. So for me, that automatically showed me that those two words are somehow linked. So either way, I reread when I was disinterested. I asked questions throughout because I had various ideas pop up as I was going through things. I used a little bit of my background knowledge, right? I remembered that this whole piece of text dealt with politics and specifically who should be able to rule. Um, so I was linking it back to when I was in college, and I didn't lose my place really by making a distracting connection or anything like that. But after the first sentence, I definitely felt like, hey, this isn't this isn't fun. This is boring. The words are really difficult and so forth. So I did take notice of that, but if you do make a distracting connection for whatever reason, so like say I start thinking about how the kings were chosen or how they abolished the monarchy, and then I start going on and I start researching things and so forth, I might get distracted and then not remember where I was. So it's really, really important to understand that you need to take notice of these particular strategies. So, once again, let's take a look at our slide here. And these are all the different distractions that we can have. And these are the general fix-up strategies that we can use to fix them. And that is going to be our conclusion for our second video here on noticing when you lose your way. And please make sure that you understand that this is a very important skill. So our first skill was following our inner conversation and leaving tracks. And then now our second skill or reading behavior is noticing when we lose our way. Noticing when those basic distractions come in, and more importantly, it's for me it's making sure you start developing that attribute of active persistence, that no matter what's going on, no matter how you feel, you're trying to keep on going. You're not going to give up, okay? So that's it, and I'll see you in the next video.